We're covering the Pit Special with Stits Lite. Welcome everybody back to the channel. It's Brendan here, just plain crazy, and we are at that stage of the build process with the EMHW 47% Pit Special. It's time to get this thing covered. As I said in the intro, in the opening, we're using Stits Lite covering. So here on the bench, I've laid out a bunch of things that we're going to need. We have our fabric. Guys, this is going to be a test piece for us, all right? We have some of our actual pieces. We'll cover those in a little bit. That'll be more towards the end. But we have our poly brush to seal, our poly tack for gluing, MEK that you can pick up at a regular hardware store as a thinner, some cups. We have our pink tape, a respirator, well-ventilated shop. Gloves are important. Sharp scissors or a nice fabric cutter, and brush, and as well as we'll have things like razor blades. So this is where we're going to start, because not only am I going to use this as a test bed for the fabric, I'm going to use it as a test bed for painting as well, to figure out exactly the sequence and how I want to paint this plane. So we've gone through and done a lot of extensive reading on the Stits site on how to do their covering and how they recommend it, both full scale and model. And I've also watched their instructional videos. So this is going to be the first plane that I've fabric coated or covered. So this is not super expert advice, but I'm going to kind of give you the first-hand Cliff Notes version as we go through everything. And obviously you'll see how it turned out, and thus the reason for the test piece. We don't get good at anything on the first shot. It comes with experience and practice. So I would rather see us practice on this than on the full scale and mess it up. And too many times I see guys that want to learn how to do something and they go right to their big, beautiful model and screw it up. So for me, we'll screw this up. Let's get to it. So as we get started, I've poured a little bit of MEK. Please be aware that the MEK or the MEK substitute will eat through certain plastics. So if that sits in there long enough and the plastic is not suitable, it will chew through it. I found little silicone cups to work best. MEK for thinner, and this is our poly tack. So you can start off your leading edge of your wing. You can make paint lines. We want to overlap by about 2 inches. Here, which would be starting at the bottom, rolling up to the top edge. We can go ahead and chalk line that. We could pencil tape it. For now, I'm eyeballing the distance away from that leading edge just a little bit, and then we'll pull this around. So we're going to just take our brush and we're just going to dip it in that MEK, and then we're just going to thin the poly tack just a little bit. And this gives you more working time. This stuff dries really, really quickly. And we're going to do this on the test piece because we're going to follow along the same process with the plain parts, but that way we don't have to sit and explain everything. So gloves to keep the stuff off my hands. We have that thinned down a little bit. This stuff dries super quick once we put it on, so we're just going to brush this on. Just give it a nice coating. You don't have to do the ribs. You don't want to do the ribs. We just want to get this pressed onto there, and you want to see it wick through that fiber. If you have to, you can come back along. And dab it in just so we know it's pushed in really well. And that stuff's already starting to like set up. You could feel it, but you can see it's clear. That stuff soaks right through. If it's not soaked through, then you have to add a little more. And the nice part is you can't screw this up, because if it's not right, you can just brush some MEK over it on a rag, put some MEK on a rag and just wipe the glue until it lets loose. Now, and right out of the gate, something here that I'll give you guys advice on is this thing has a fresh, clean factory edge that's melted to prevent it from fraying. I would have cut that off if I would have seen it. So just seeing that now already, see, we're learning things here on the trial. So as far as stretching this goes, we're doing the bottom right now. We don't need to put glue on the ribs, all right? If you have if your airfoil or ribs are concaved, you want to glue them. That most airfoils being symmetrical and roundish, it'll pull over all those ribs, so you don't have to glue it down because we're going to stretch it. Now, how tight do you stretch this? This thing will have about a 10% shrink in it with a heating iron at roughly 250 degrees. So we don't have to make this taut like a bed sheet that we can bounce quarters off of it, but we basically just want to make it like a bed sheet that you just pulled the wrinkles out of. So from here, we want to overlap the top about an inch. Here, we want 2 inches in the front. We only want an inch here. So being that we could take some of this off, fabric cutter will work really well here. And again, we can do this with a straight edge to make sure it's nice and straight and clean. For us, good enough for government work right now. So we're going to do the same thing here. We're going to take some of our polytack. And you don't want to do too big of a section because the stuff dries so quick. You can add a little bit of MEK to slow that down. And just pick your brushes wisely so they're not losing a lot of fibers. And the nylon can actually be melted by the MEK. And then we're just going to push this glue right through that surface. Now, one of the things that we can also do as we go to do our edges is we can heat and pull this so that way everything is kind of rolled up over those edges. We can cut this stuff off at 45s, glue it in, but you can heat as you pull over this way to form it to tack that stuff down. Now we've used our temp gun to calibrate the heating iron at 250 degrees. We've identified our butt rib here, and what we're going to do is start to pull and stretch this over the butt rib. Just start to form this. And this will just help to take some of the wrinkles out of it and make it easier to stretch and conform to that area. Once we have this all worked out, what we're going to do then is we're going to glue it to this butt rib and then cut it right off at the top. So for now, we're just stretching it. You could see how it conforms to that shape. That's what we want. So you can see our edges are all finished up, look nice and clean, cut off and trimmed. So you could see that we have some flex, looseness there. So again, this thing will shrink a lot. We're trying to protect our wings so we don't warp it, give it dihedral, anything like that. So you start at the outsides and you work your way in evenly. So this shrinks based on temperature. Don't use a heat gun. Take the iron over it, 250 degrees. And you don't just want to do an area that you have a wrinkle and neglect this. You want to make sure that you get all of the covering so it's all shrank equally. Then we'll come back over to this one. And if you want it tighter, you turn the temperature up. So you can go up to 350 degrees for maximum shrink. Right now we're just going to do 250. That turned out really, really good. So let's go ahead and cut ourselves another piece. We'll time lapse it, and then we are going to do the top piece. All right, guys, we have our heating iron up to 350. We tightened everything. I just marked it so I know where it is for next time. We've tightened everything to 250. Now at 350, this is going to get it to its maximum shrinkage. And again, you want to make sure that you cover the whole project with this. Don't let any area go undone. You want to shrink the whole fabric. Now, if you're working on something lighter and smaller, you know, maybe you stick at 250. But just know the more tight we can get this, the less likely it is to flex and cause any paint issues down the road. That's edges, that's everything. Again, starting from the outside, working our way in. All right, and that's that. So this turned out really good. Super happy with it. Now we're going to go ahead and we're going to put in our poly brush. We're going to start to fill in the weave. Now the poly brush is already pre-mixed, so that first coating was brushed on, thus the verbiage poly brush. If you want to take some of those lines out from the brush strokes, you can go ahead and spray it. And again, it's already pre-mixed. All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and spray on our poly brush. So what we're shooting for is a finish like this. We need to make it glossy, make it wet. We got to fill in the weave. So this stuff really dries up in about 15 minutes. Again, respirator for all this stuff, good ventilation from where we are. On this test piece, we're not just brushing on a little bit here, we're giving it a good spray. We're using just a small Hiawatha paint gun and poly brush. So you can brush it on. You may get some brush marks in it. Again, spraying will eliminate that. And if you really want to make sure you got the weave full, you can use a Lite right across the top of the surface. So let's go ahead and get the rest of this sprayed up. All right, so our test panel is done drying. Definitely learning some things along the way. I hope this shows up in the camera. So on the bottom, I am doing just one coat, and it was to say a heavier coat. On the top, I did 2 coats. You can definitely see a difference in the sheen on the top versus what's on the bottom. I don't want to put on any more material than need be, but I want to see what the difference is between what looks to be full and what I definitely know is full. So We're going to get ready to put on our rib stitching. Now the rib stitching, you can run this rib stitching all the way around if you want. On this test piece, most of the time you're just going to do it right there. On this test piece, I'm gonna lay this all the way around. And the nice part is, so you don't wind up with any creases, you can just, I'm gonna lay this all the way around in one piece. And if you leave this dry with the poly brush on it, you can then cut the ends off after it dries and it won't leave any frays. And why is that important? Because that's one of the things that I've now started to see and learn. Anywhere there's a fray, you will get some type of residual highlighter garbage. And I'm leaving it just to see what happens when I paint it. Also, the factory seam of the covering, where they used a heat iron or whatever to melt the fabric, it left a rough ridge right there, or ledge, that's definitely noticeable. Also, small protrusion in my test wood here, not that I care about it, but we know for our model, anything that's sticking up that's a anomaly, that's not smooth, will stick out like that, like a sore thumb. Any of the runs of the poly brush that you see right there, you can just take a rag with some MEK and just rub it out. You don't want to soak the wood because then you get rid of your fabric bond, but you can't even feel where this stuff is really seamed or bonded anymore. It's really just one piece of cloth at this point. So we're going to go ahead now and take more poly brush. We're going to lay it right where we're going to do our rib stitching, and then we're also going to do our leading edge strip. And then we'll let it dry, we'll cut it off, and we'll get ready to spray this with a poly spray. So let's go. All right, so let's talk about some of the things that I learned from just the trial piece. We sprayed on 2 coats of, you saw that pink stuff, the poly brush, right? So in here, it's super smooth. Like, it really filled in the weave really well. And here it's lighter. You can almost see some small fabric, maybe a little bit, but it's really, really like minuscule. So when we brushed on that poly brush to put on our rib stitching on the area that was sealed, it really left brush marks in it. You could see the brush marks really hard. Where underneath, that poly brush really kind of soaked in and I can't see it. So 2 coats may look good initially, but if you're gonna do this, not so good. Maybe just stay with 1 coat and see how it looks when we start to paint this thing. Otherwise, what I would recommend is that you literally brush on the material on your rib stitching and then lay it on, and that will prevent all this on the side. Any imperfections in your covering will be highlighted the more paint you put on there. Dust, take tack rags before you paint things, otherwise all the dust is going to stick out like a sore thumb. We can sand those out if you wanted to, but we're just going to be more careful as we get into our actual pieces before we start to spray those. This junk is just stuff that was on the tape, that's why I use this piece. That wouldn't come off. And I have a piece here that's slightly lifted. So we talked earlier too about the poly brush. There was a small run. You could still see the small run. So again, you could have taken that out with just a little
MEK on a paper towel and you could have taken that stuff out. But otherwise, I mean, the stuff really is pretty easy to work with. It's just the learning curve all the way around. And that's why we experiment with stuff like this. So what we're going to do now is we're going to spray with our Tropical Glitz. We're going to give this thing a base coat of white. That will accent our silver that we are going with. On the top side, I'm going to do this in the white and see how it looks compared to just doing the silver, leaving this way. So I'm going to see if I need the base coat of this for sure or not, being that we're using the poly spray. So we'll see, more experimenting, but otherwise we got our landing gear done. Let me show you that. So one leg of our landing gear looks really, really good. I like it. There is a little bit of glue roughness right there. We'll clean some of that up with a rag with some MEK on it, but not enough that it soaks in and loosens our glue. But I'm really happy with the way that looked. I can't wait to get that thing sealed up and get some paint on it, see how it looks. So this is going to be a close-up. Hopefully we can see all this in the camera and it shows up for the video okay. This piece, there was things I needed to learn from it, so I wasn't real detail-oriented with it. But let me just point out some of the things as we go through. So number one, you can see a hard ridge line right there, not from the pink tape, those little sawtooth, but underneath. So the fabric, when it's cut, is sealed on the edges so it don't fray. If you use that edge, that's what you're going to get, is a huge lump underneath. All of these sawtooth things from the pink tape, when you put those down, it's best to go back over with your iron and iron them down. That was a good tip from Jerry. I did a lot of time studying books, videos, things like that of how this stuff was done. And through Stits, and the order they want you to put down the pink tape, it's actually better to put the pink tape down before you spray it with the poly brush. And I'm going to use the pink tape. I'm going to put it on the table and brush it there instead of brushing it on here. That would eliminate a lot of these brush strokes underneath. Now this side only had one brushed on cover of poly brush and one spray. And even with the pink tape, I still see brush marks. This side had two, and you could definitely see it when you get it in the right sunlight. I don't want all those extra brush marks in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to put on our covering. We are going to go over anywhere where it touches the wood with poly brush. Then we're going to put on our pink tape, seal it down again, and then spray over it with poly brush to seal it down. Any imperfections will shine through with a beacon. Imperfections in the wood, imperfections in your pink tape, dust, dirt. So we're going to talk a lot about tack cloth and how to use that to prevent this stuff. Bleed through. You're going to, as hard as you work at it, if you don't double spray your paint, you're going to get small bleed throughs. And depending on how picky you want to be, that might just make a problem for you and your model. So, otherwise, as far as masking off and painting, everything went really well, better than expected. So frays, any little frays will be amplified when you put tape on them. Stringers, little pieces of thread, all of that stuff will be amplified. Yes, you can still burn through this covering. The covering will shrink hard enough that if you have a bad glue joint, it will break it. So tons and tons, guys. I learned from a 12 by 12 piece. I encourage you to do the same thing. Learn with it, play with it. That's how we model. So anyway, we're going to start with the landing gear first. Let's get going. Well, everybody, that wraps up this portion of the build on the EMHW 47% Pit Special.
Thanks for joining me. I hope this helps you if you're building one of these, or maybe it entices you guys to dive into a wood kit also. So it is Brendan here at Just Plain Crazy. You're just plain crazy for always hanging out and watching. Do me a favor, smash that like button. It helps us out a lot. Subscribe and ding that bell notification and set it to always so you're always made aware of our cool content. Don't forget to check us out on the official Facebook and Instagram Just Plain Crazy pages. With that being said, links down in the description below where I pick this stuff up. But I wish you guys happy flights. Peace out.